Hi, welcome to the section of the course where we're going to take a quick look at how to use one of the most powerful ways to access online data with Tableau when you don't have your own server. So the Tableau Web Data Connector is a great way to use HTML and JavaScript to connect to any data web source and use it in Tableau. Your version of Tableau has to be 9 or above, and there are a couple of different ways to use the Tableau Web Data Connectors. Here at this URL, you can get all sorts of different tutorials and resources based on your level of experience and interest. So there is a Web Data Connector SDK. So SDK is short for Software Development Kit. And that's how you can create your own web data connector that reads data from virtually any site that publishes data in JSON, which is right here, XML, or HTML. Those are three fancy words for basically the kind of data that is usually on websites. If you want to develop your own web data connector, here are the developer docs. Here are some samples that are open sourced on GitHub. So if you're having trouble setting up your own web data connector, you can look at some samples from the GitHub code repository and learn how to do it. And then here are community connectors. So these are web data connectors that have already been built and are open for anybody to use. And that's what we're going to look at right now. We'll go to that link. And this is a long list of connectors that have simply been written by people or businesses that like to use Tableau and like to bring data from the web into Tableau and are making them available. Now, important, they put a caveat: these connectors are not written or supported by Tableau. So it's always important that you check it out and you test it and you play around with it for a while before you do any official analysis or publish a story based on a web data connector. But my experience after working with them for more than a year is that they're pretty solid. People who go to the trouble to build these are usually doing a pretty good job. And you can find some really interesting sources of data that I had never thought of. Board Game Geek User Plays, which is a very cool data set that I encourage you to explore and learn about. Data.world is an interesting, relatively new site that is trying to get people to form a community where they're sharing their data and sharing their analysis. I know several journalists that really love Data.world, and this is the way to connect to the data sets that are on Data.world. For our purposes, we are going to use what I use almost on a daily basis, which is the U.S. American Community Survey Profile. This is an outstanding way to connect to the huge data set that is essentially the American Census. Open a new Tableau workbook and click on Connect to Data. Now here's where you have all the wonderful ways to connect to data in Tableau. There are probably more than you will ever know what to do with. So we're going to go to More, under Connect to a Server, More, and go to Web Data Connector. So click on Web Data Connector, and it'll give you a little bit of information about how to use the Web Data Connector. You have to enter the URL. This might be different from the site that holds your data. It almost always will be different. And if the connector displays a web page, enter any information that you're prompted for and then submit the page. 3, wait while the connector retrieves your data and imports it into Tableau as an extract. So that's important. The data comes into Tableau already as an extract, which is essential and required if you want to publish any visualizations from your data story onto Tableau Public, which is the free place. So we'll enter our URL, and it is loading. So here we'll be given the various choices. So we can choose the ACS. So the ACS is short for American Community Survey. And we can use the 1-year profile, the 3-year profile, or the 5-year profile. There's lots of documentation that can be read on the census website about what these different profiles mean. But essentially, the year profile means how many years of data are used to get you the estimates. And if you use a 5-year profile, you can get much more granular estimates because the estimates are more stable. So once we choose the 5-year profile, it gives us a bunch of different variables that we're going to get to choose from, and we can choose our geography type. So here's where it gets really interesting. So you can choose to get summary data from the country, or you can choose state, county subdivisions, tracts, congressional districts, which can be very useful if you're doing a data story that's political in nature. Zip codes, school districts, also interesting if you're working on some educational stories, and then metro and urban areas. For the purposes of our story, we're going to look at counties for right now, and we're going to start with all states. You can choose a specific state and a specific county if you'd like, but since we're in the early days of our story, we're in the exploratory section, we're just going to choose all states, because I find it's usually good to start really big and get a big kind of overview, a bird's eye view of what the data is like in the biggest possible selection, and look for interesting trends, and then gradually narrow and become more local or more refined in your focus. So what variables would we like to look at? So we're doing a data story on immigration. So we would like to look at place of birth. I'm going to click the triangle so I can see it all. We don't want the total population, but we do want the foreign-born population, because that means somehow they immigrated, whether they were family class immigrants, business class immigrants, refugees. These people were not born in the United States. So we would like the estimate and the percent estimate. The margin of errors and the percent margin of errors would be important if this is going to become the foundation of your story. But right now, we're just interested in some exploratory data analysis. You can get more variables if you'd like, but we are just going to stay here. So here's the button, upper left, retrieve census data. And now the magic is happening. It's executing our query. So now the fine people who have created this web data connector have made it that easy to get American Community Survey data into Tableau. That is a web data connector.